We are definitely in a disruption phase. And I think that's why I'm so busy. People are finally starting to ask some deeper questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? There is a reach for self-agency, but it's messy. This ability to self-regulate your nervous system, to be able to understand energetic dissonance in your body and your mind, to be able to live more intuitively are becoming the superpowers now.
Hi, and welcome to Metaconscious Leaders, where today we are focusing in a specific field of interest that helps us to be fully alive in all aspects of our lives and express the full spectrum of our resourcefulness in living, leading, and loving. More and more people are awakening to the idea that how we regulate ourselves is key to harnessing our thoughts and energies to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives. If you're thinking that your concentration could be better, your sleep is not what it used to be, you're experiencing overwhelm, or that your emotional fuse is shorter than you'd like it to be, then this is for you. Because today, my guest is Danielle Van De Velde, who is a master of blending the calm, the still, and the centered with the creative, dynamic, and powerful, and all with meaning and purpose. Dani lives and works in Singapore with individuals and organizations, helping people to understand and master the art of meditation, transformative inner practice, and healing. Dani has worked extensively in business across 4 continents, in financial services and real estate, and says that cultivating our spiritual self transforms our experience of life from reactive to responsive and into expansive creative living. Living a spirited life is to open the door to well-being, purpose, intuition, and joy. Welcome, Dani, to Metaconscious Leaders, and thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here. I love your podcast.
Dani, can we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself? What's been your personal journey to this point, to you doing the work that you're doing?
Sure. I'll try and give you an abridged version. So I was born and I grew up in Sydney in a great family that really invested in education and life experience. And I've got 3 siblings and grew up on the beautiful northern beaches of Sydney near the sea and in nature and so on. It's gorgeous. And I've always had big questions from when I was very little. I grew up in a Catholic house and I loved my faith. You know, I was introduced at a very early age to prayer and devotion and ritual and the understanding that our consciousness doesn't die, and the ideas of eternal life, and also the ideas of choirs of angels and saints, and all of that beautiful stuff that's wrapped up in not just Catholicism but those sort of traditional world religions. However, I did from an early age have questions that weren't being answered from that framework, and at the same time as well, I had a fantastic elite education. I got a bachelor's degree in commerce and law in Sydney. And then I didn't even go to my graduation ceremony. I just took off to Italy, like as soon as I got the notice that the degree was in the bag, and because I was just a seeker from the start. So I moved to Italy. The plan was 6 months, learn the language, eat a lot of pasta. I stayed there for 3 years, and I did a degree in turn of the century Italian literature and EU finance. So not a very useful degree, but a wonderful one. Came back from Italy slightly heavier, fluent in Italian, and started working. So I worked for a retail financial services company, and that was part of a broader property group. Within a couple of years, I was fast tracked. I was one of the people, sort of the fast track, had the touch for the fast track, and I was sent to London to help set up a business off the back of the Blue Water Shopping Centre, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners would know, down in Kent. So that was a really revolutionary, very progressive development in retail, and also in its community integration.
Yeah.
And they were changing from a project-based business into an actual business in the UK, and further expansion into Europe. And I had just finished a large exercise in cultural and process re-engineering in the retail financial services arm of this business. And so the thinking was, rather than retrofit later, all of these lovely progressive ideas on organizational culture and team and incentivizing people and core values and all that stuff. They brought me across to do that at the outset. And then I had a lovely 10-year plus career based in London. I did work in New York as well. At one stage, I had a global responsibility. I was working then with internal and external communications and strategy. And I loved it. And I learned a lot about people and collectives and the mind and creativity and innovation. But increasingly, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to this, as my clients do, increasingly felt less meaning in it. And it became untenable for me. And I didn't know exactly what it was that I was to do, but I knew that I had to make some space to explore that. And then, sort of in the underground of all of that, I had a very sort of vigorous spiritual exploration. So I was looking at yogic philosophy, I was looking into Kabbalah, I loved the writings of Rumi, I loved some of the New Age writers like Neil Donald Walsh and
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle, their earlier work, and my mind was just being fed by
Mm.
beautiful sort of smorgasbord of mystical thinking and the early start of the neuroscience into regulation and the connection between meditation and mindfulness. You know, it wasn't as
Yeah.
mainstream as it is now.
Yeah.
And we certainly didn't have the evidence that we have now, you know, the empirical evidence, because our abilities to measure heart brain coherence, what the nervous system is doing, is so much better today.
Yeah.
But I was meditating really solidly, but I was self-taught. So eventually, at this stage, I had just married and we were thinking about starting a family and so on. And we moved back to Australia. And that's when I found my first meditation teacher, Louise Gilmore, just a brilliant woman. She passed over last year. And she took me right back to basics on meditation and, you know, breath work. She was very well schooled in Tibetan Buddhism. So, and that's really, you know, that where all of the beautiful traditional smarts on heart meditation is, and the power of heart to transmute frequency and mood and to heal. And she was also a shamanic practitioner. And so she moved me with her. I moved into some of the more psychic arts of shamanic journeying and energetic healing from shamanic frameworks, and started to really get a much broader, more expanded understanding of what our mind is capable of.
Yes.
I qualified with her, was what was then called the Awareness Institute in Australia, to teach meditation. And then, and by that stage, I'd also had two babies, and in very quick succession. So I went through that initiation of motherhood. And then my husband, his work invited us to move to Singapore, which we did 11 years ago. Singapore and Southeast Asia is just this fantastic melting pot of spirituality. It's where a lot of the original modalities in sound, in mantra, in meditation come from. And so it was just like standing at the door of a candy shop for me. I met my first Reiki master here very shortly. I was attuned in Reiki and moved on with another master to master teacher level. And so Reiki became a source of fascination and also another flavor, if you like, in this lifelong exploration of what is the mind, what is energy, how are we actually designed, how do we master it. And so I I needed something to do. My plan was to come, be an expat wife, learn mahjong, do lots of yoga, and do long lunches, but that didn't last very long. And so I've formulated. I got a visa, a permit to start a little meditation business. And at that time in Singapore, the meditation scene was really fragmented. So either you could join like a Buddhist center, which is what I actually ended up doing for my personal practice because I knew it was quality. The Rinpoches were great. They had a lot of visiting teachers and it was just very, very solid meditation practice. So you could either do that in some kind of religious framework, or at the other end of the spectrum, there were a lot of sort of private type communities, very closed, usually with a guru leader, very expensive. And there was nothing in the middle that was secular meditation that blended neuroscience and cellular biology. There was just nothing in the middle. And I remember lamenting with my teacher, Louise, she was still alive at that stage, saying, there's nothing here, like that I like the way you teach. And she just said, she was a woman of very few words. She said, well, perhaps that's because it's time you start teaching. And so I did. And it went off. Like there was so much appetite for that kind of more scientific, quite practical, none of the sort of woo-woo jargon that was on social media and also community. So that's what's something beautiful about meditation is when people meditate together, something happens and there's an intimacy and a felt connection that I'm not sure is facilitated by any other kind of joint interest. Because you're connecting as you're moving your mind into meditative states at a very different levels. So I started formulating communities around different meditation courses, different explorations, and then it really evolved from there. My corporate background opened the gate into doing workshops and keynote talks within corporates. Singapore, because of its tax status and because of its location, has got, the world's largest corporations here. And so that became a part of my work as well. And my teaching evolved as well beyond meditation. I started teaching what I had learned for years in a satellite ashram in Sydney when I was much younger. It started moving into understanding the energy body via the context of the chakras and the nadis. I started deepening my healing work. And then, more recently, that has culminated in a lot of content creations. So 2.5 years ago, I published my first book called Spirited, A Guide to Your Innate Design to Transform Your Life. I started a podcast a few years ago called The Modern Crone, where I have interviews with people who are real experts or elders within their spiritual modalities. And that was very popular. So I launched that during COVID. And it's not during some kind of a lockdown is not a bad time to launch a podcast because people are desperate for a feeling of story and connection and learning. I'm a media contributor. I've got a radio show called Spirited Living. And then more recently, in the last couple of years, I have moved more online. So I've got 2 spiritual communities. One is called Spirited Living, and that's open to everyone. And there's beautiful courses and masterclasses and group coaching, but all around cultivating spirituality as a pillar for your well-being. And then the second one is Spirit of Business, and that's coaching people who founders who want to open an offering for the well-being of others. And that's very
Brilliant.
varied. That's yeah. And so they're my 2 current their membership models. I love them. The communities are beautiful. And I've got more ideas of other kinds of communities that I want to launch in that format, Spirited Kids, Spirited Mothers. So that is my preferred format. And then the other thing that I do is I create guided meditation tracks, which are streamable for free on Insight Timer app. And they're hugely popular. So, there's a huge sort of, community of people globally that don't have time to do courses and don't, but they do still need some guidance. Again, I started generating guidance, which has all of the instruction and the smarts in it from my meditation teaching training, but very beautiful, bespoke, created music and done very, very professionally. I do it in the studio and I've got an editor and so on. And I also produce guided meditation tracks, which are exclusive to my memberships as well. So it's kind of a broad sort of portfolio, I guess, of activities, but
Yeah.
the umbrella over it is passionately advocating for spirituality to be a serious part of your life in the modern world.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that struck me when we first spoke a few weeks ago now, Dani,
Yes.
it's something that struck me about you is that you seem very, very grounded. You're talking about the meditation, breath work, and so forth. But your experience in life, and you just set out how you've come to this point. But a combination of all of those things, a blending of all of those things, means that I think you achieve you're a wonderful example of the blending of what you preach and, or rather teach. I think I don't see you preaching, but
No,
what
not
you
a preacher.
teach, yeah,
Yeah.
but what you teach with the practical aspects of life, and particularly in the context of metaconscious leaders, um, people who are in business, people who are working very hard, long hours, under a great deal of stress, and so forth. So I
Thank you. But I think, there's a lot of practitioners. It's a noisy arena, the arena that I'm in, and I think it's very important that when you're engaging a spiritual practitioner, you have a good look at their life. Are they well? Are they succeeding? Are they in harmony with their environment? Because there's some flashy websites and there's a lot of quite interesting narrative, but I think walking the talk is really important because it also then evolves the practitioner's knowledge. Every time I meditate, I receive or understand something more deeply, or I learn to explain it in a different way that's more useful for different
yeah.
people.
Okay, so let's we're going to get into meditation and what is it in a little while. Can we just sort of step back for a moment and look at the context? There's a lot going on at the moment, isn't there, in the world? How
Yes.
would you characterize? And a lot going on at different levels. There's a lot going on above the surface, below the surface, conscious, unconscious. How would you characterize where we are as humanity right now in this time in history?
My goodness. I mean, this week alone has taken global politics to a whole new level. I think we are definitely in a disruption phase. And I think that's why I'm so busy. So, because people are starting to look around them to the structures within the world that they perhaps just took for granted or blindly trusted, and they're really questioning it. They're questioning political allegiances, they're questioning medical and pharmaceutical agendas, they're questioning military and lawmaking. And a lot of people are getting very discombobulated by all of the eruption that's going on and the narratives that are coming out of certain places around the world. And I think in some ways it's a fantastic thing for the human race because I think people are finally starting to ask some deeper questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? How do I claim back self agency on my well being, on my health, on the activities, on my relational fields, on the content that I'm absorbing? There is a reach for self agency that I'm seeing, and I applaud that, and I'm here for it. That's why I'm doing what I do, and that's why a lot of other people who I greatly admire are doing what they do. But it's messy. This ability, which I know we're going to get to self regulate your nervous system, to be able to understand energetic dissonance in your body and your mind, to be able to live more intuitively, are becoming the superpowers now. And I think what's interesting is that I think we are naturally designed to operate that way, but we've been steered in different ways through traditional education and through the popular narrative, and I think people are going, oh, hold on. What can I do that's different because this is not working for me? I don't feel well.
There appears in many and people that I talk to and guests that I have on that talk about an awakening, a seismic shift in consciousness, in conscious awareness, and at the same time, so there's an inner journey taking place, but the outer journey, the outer and the experience, the interface of what we're doing in life and what is happening in the world is still real and imminent. Sorry,
Yes,
is still real and present with us. We still have to face it daily.
yes, we do. And I think they're connected.
Absolutely. They're two
The
sides of
sum
the
of
same two sides
Yeah.
of the same coin, aren't they? And
Yeah,
so
they
it
are.
comes down to this, well, if I'm meditating and I'm calm, but I've got to get out there and be doing, and this comes to me, this is where I see regulation coming in. Regulation is about the balance of my thoughts, my energies with who am I and what am I doing? What is my purpose? So we use regulation in that kind of context. Why is that regulation so important at this moment in time?
Well, for a number of different reasons. So, the slated next pandemic from coming out of the psychological arena is psychological stress. So whilst we may feel ineffectual in the face of some of the global dynamics that are going on right now, it's how we are perceiving it and how we are reacting to it, which is making us sick and making us possibly have less self-agency and discernment about our lives because we are reacting to it all the time. And so, our nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real external threat and a perceived threat. It responds the same way. And I'm a real advocate for disciplined practice because we know through neuroplasticity and through our understanding of reprogramming the nervous system that it happens through repetition. And this is quite a shift away from the clickbait fast, get it now instantly kind of thing. And it's one of the challenges that I first tackle when I take on a new coaching client or I launch a new course. That is, you're really only going to see the benefit if you discipline. And, I don't know when discipline became a dirty word, but it has,
Yeah, yeah.
like it should all be love and light. It should feel good. No, it's rigor. It's rigor.
Yeah,
But our
yeah, I agree.
system through repetition, through rigorous repetition, does reset itself and its new default point is calm. And with calm, comes a whole stack of other stuff. Our immune function improves, our cognitive function improves. We are able to sense information and energy which is beyond the boundary of our physical senses. So we become way more intuitive and make different decisions. And our relational fields improve. And all of that is evidenced. All of that is measurable. It's all evidence. So, and then of course, in your very lovely intro that you gave, you sort of followed the premise of my book and the premise of my communities, which is there is this metamorphosis that takes place from reacting to life and feeling like it's happening to you to with a little bit of mindfulness, with a bit of a pause point created, which you do through disciplined practice, which we
Yeah,
know changes the brain and the nervous system. You move from reactive to responsive. So you may still get very annoyed, you may still lose it, but you're doing that from a place of choice and discernment rather than shooting from the hip. And that has a vastly different effect on the stress hormones in our body and the deterioration that prolonged stress creates in the brain and in the body chemistry and so on. With continued practice, we move into a much more expansive view of this connection between our inner life and our outer life and our individual existence and that of the collective. Tibetan Buddhism talks about this with like those beautiful practices of Tonglen, for example, and Mudita, ball of Mudita, and Brahmavihara. All of these are heart-centered practices that link the frequency and the harmony of your heart to the whole. And it's recognized. And also, we also have some very interesting experiments that have been done over the years about how we are connected to events intuitively and psychically and in our dreaming and so on that are even yet to play out. So there's a lot of that interconnectedness, that quantum entanglement that we're still exploring in theory, but more and more people are experiencing it. And then from expansive, we move to creative. We move to an even deeper connection with beyond the human constructs and collectives to organizing patterns that are non-human. So a good example of that's nature, of course. But then that's where we move into much more sort of, I guess, higher spiritual understanding about the existence of other beings, the existence of our ancestors and the spirit realm.
And our interconnectedness with them and our
Absolutely.
interdependence with them. It's not just, oh, they're over there. Actually, we are part of them. We are them in a way, at a level.
Yeah, we're a
Can't we
continuum.
can't get
Yeah,
away from that.
no,
Yeah,
we can't.
yeah,
And we are born with the ability for conscious connection with those
yeah,
realms.
yeah,
But, it does require some mind mastery and ability to regulate at will to be able to perceive it because it's much more
yeah,
subtle.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there are two things that I'd like to talk about now. One is meditation. The other is breath. But I've mentioned them in that, and I think we should flip them, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we be talking about breath before meditation?
Well,
We should you take
oh
the,
my
we should
goodness. Okay. So the semantics. So breath work is hugely popular now. And we've got
so,
Wim Hof out there on his mountain, bare chested panting, and we've got breathwork facilitation courses and holotropic breathing and beautiful books. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. There's just so much out there about the connection between the breath, the brain, the nervous system,
yeah. So
and
let's
the
distill it.
operation.
Let's distill it right down to some basics because there's a lot of very good stuff up there. And if all we can do is create a bit of an introduction and whet the appetite, then I think we've kind of opened the door to a further conversation at a later time. I hope, Danny.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Okay.
we can go for weeks without food, can't we? We can go for many days without water. But when it comes to air, we are down to minutes, even seconds. And so it's vital, and yet it's a habit that we have, but we appear to completely disregard it. I remember in one of the spiritual traditions describing the breath as the thread that connects our soul with, or our spirit with
Yep.
our body. And
Yep.
when the breath goes, the thread goes. So it's very
Yep.
fragile,
Yep. Yep.
and yet it's so significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is intelligent design in nature. So the essential nature of the breath to our survival is telling us something. The fact that our breathing is the only function of our autonomic nervous system that we can somewhat control. We can't control our heartbeats, but we can control our breath, is telling us something. The connection between predominantly nasal breathing and creating coherence between the hemispheres of the brain and synchronicity between the sympathetic and parasympathetic arms of the nervous system, which happens through intentional breathing, is telling us something. There is a reason why the breath is so central to life and it's beyond the hardware. And because, so for example, as you know, I teach psychic development circles in my communities and I'm also a psychic medium. Now, before we can move into psychically reading someone, and my students do it very, very accurately. Or when I join my development group for mediumship every week with my tutor, Christine Morgan, the first thing we do is we stop and we breathe because intentional breathing regulates the brain and the nervous system, which then allows a clearing of the awareness, a clearing of the mind. And then with some training, you can perceive patterned information and energy that's moving through the mind. It's moving through the mind all the time, but
When
we're
you
not
say
perceiving it.
When you said you start by breathing, we're breathing all the time. What do you mean specifically when you say we start with breathing?
We breathe intentionally. So there's some really interesting things that happen in the body when we
What are
put
you
our
doing? And what are we doing when we breathe intentionally?
we're noticing the act of breathing. It's pretty
Yeah.
simple. Like there's
Yeah.
no I teach pranayama, which is more complex, different patterns of breathing, and they have lots of different effects on the body. But to get this regulation that we're talking about, all we need to do is stop and notice the action of the breath. Now, for a lot of people, that's really hard to do for more than 3 breaths. And that's why you need to train yourself to do it. But when we put our awareness on our breath, so we're just noticing the inhale and the exhale. That's it. We're noticing the inhale and the exhale. We're noticing
Do you
the
want just to
rhythm.
do a demonstration right now with our listeners in this moment?
Okay, so I'll invite our listeners now to close their eyes and have a little wiggle of your body wherever you're sitting so that you can sense a symmetry in the placement of legs and the displacement of weight at the base. So if you need to move, that's cool. Move your shoulders, wiggle, and let the body settle into as much as you can sense is center. And now what I want you to do is raise your posture. So I don't want it to be tight or forced, but I want you to have the feeling that you're just bringing a bit of elegance into the length of your spine. And I want you now to move your shoulders down and back. Again, nothing forced. So find that natural, lovely, elegant, long posture. Now, by doing that, just by focusing on your body before we start on the breath, you've brought your mind in from the past, the future, the machinations, and you've anchored it in the body, and the body is present. The body is here. The body is now. Now, what I want you to do is rotate your attention to the movement of your breath. You don't need to change your breath in any way. I just want you to, and breathing through the nose, if you're able to do that. I want you to notice the cool influx of the in-breath and the warm, heavier out-breath. Notice the difference between the in-breath moving into your body and the out-breath moving out, releasing from the body. Now, what I want you to do is track the in-breath and see how far into your body you can feel the coolness before it turns warm. Might be at the throat. You might be able to track that coolness a bit deeper into your lungs. Doesn't matter. Just follow the cool in-breath until you can't feel it anymore. And a long, lovely release. Now, one final touch point, which is keeping you engaged with your breath, is when you're breathing in, I want you to feel your body's response to the introduction of a fresh, new breath. Feel the receiving. It's almost like a gentle celebration. For some who haven't been breathing well, a relief. And now, as you exhale, feel the release in that out breath. That out breath is carrying toxins, it's carrying tension. Your system is releasing with every exhalation. And for 3 more breaths, as you breathe in, I want you to say in your mind, I receive. As you breathe out, I release. Good. So that was a very, very short example of
Thank you.
intentional breathing. Now, what you will notice now, Greg, is that your natural breath has become very subtly smoother. Your in breath has become very subtly deeper, and your out breath slightly longer. And you're a very present man, but you may also feel that you might have clicked in a bit more into this conversation, a bit more
Absolutely.
presence.
Yeah,
Okay, so your mind's not flying off to the next question you're going to ask me right now, is it?
absolutely correct.
Okay. So all of those simple things that I've just got you to notice are symptomatic of a slightly more regulated nervous system. And there's other things that happen when we notice our breath. So our breath does deepen, it does lengthen. We move to a diaphragmatic breath when we notice the breath. So you can't force a diaphragmatic breath. And most of us, when we're in a beta brainwave, which is busy through the day, tick, 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 not present, we breathe thoracically. So we're only breathing quite shallowly, like the top 20% of our lungs. When we stop and take a couple of deep breaths like we just did, the breath lengthens to an abdominal breath. And that's indicating that our brainwave patterning is lengthening and smoothing, but also there's a neural sensor on the abdominal wall that measures changes in abdominal pressure. And when the breath drops and lengthens, it triggers that sensor, which sends a message to the brain to calm the activity down. So, and that's just a couple of many mechanisms that connect the breath to the brain to the nervous system. And at its simplest version, all we need to do is stop and notice breathing. That's it. We're
Yeah.
designed for it.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a palpable way of regulating our physiology, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's the natural and the sort of innate way.
Yeah. And as you say, very simple. I remember reading that Tiger Woods used breath work for regulating, maybe indirectly, but regulating his heartbeat. So he would be walking down a fairway with thousands of people on either side cheering or doing whatever they're doing. And he would be focusing on his breath work, on his
Yep. Just
regulating
breathing.
his being
Yep. Yep.
and his heart rate.
Yeah, there's an
Yeah.
important distinction to make as well between nasal breathing and mouth breathing. So, the simple rule of thumb is when you breathe through the nose, you decelerate, and when you breathe through the mouth, you accelerate your system. So, if you're looking to regulate your heart rate variability, and to calm your stress responses and to calm frenetic activity in the mind, you always breathe through the nose. And the reason for that is there's a biological connection, there's a physiological connection. So the air moving through the nasal passages stimulate the cilia, which are the hair-like microscopic nerve endings. And when they're stimulated, they send nerve impulses to the left and right cortical of the brain. And that's a crossover. The right nostril bathes the left brain and the left nostril bathes the right brain. And so that's why pranayama like Nadi Shodhana, where you alternate your nasal breathing, that's what that's working with. And that's fascinating. And also we've got this innate system between nasal breathing and the nervous system. Because the right nasal passage is connected to the left brain is connected with the sympathetic nervous system and vice versa. And so as the corticals of the brain start to come into coherence because we're rhythmically bathing them with nasal breathing, so too to the arms of the nervous system, because that's one system. And
Okay.
and that's where we start to get the more physiological calming going on, because the nervous system regulates our sleep, it regulates our body chemistry, it regulates our stress hormone. And so when we're intentionally breathing, we're doing a lot more than just clearing the mind. We are absolutely regulating the heart rate. And when we do it regularly and we're able to regulate at will, we reduce the amount of stress hormone generally in the blood. And that's why empirical tests show that regular meditators have far less stress hormone in their system, and cognitive decline is generally almost all related to elevated inflammation that comes from stress hormones, stress responses.
Yeah.
So it's all connected.
There's also if we breathe in a short breath and breathe out a long breath,
Yes.
we are essentially signaling to the body to calm down, go to sleep,
Yes.
as opposed to the flip side. So if we're trying to go to sleep, then actually a short in breath, long out breath,
Yes.
lengthening the out breath is one
Yes.
way
So
of calming us down. Then
the
also the flip is
absolutely.
to vitalize.
The other way. Yeah, absolutely. So what's going on there is that if we try and double the exhalation, the length of the exhalation to the inhalation, so counting the breath is a good way to do that. The longer exhalation stimulates the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is responsible for a lot of functions in the body, including heart rate variability, but also the amygdala, which is our like reactive, stress trigger, which has a role, but we're not supposed to be on high alert all the time. We're supposed to go on high alert for short bursts to basically get ourselves out of imminent threat. But looping back to psychological stress, if we don't have mastery over the mind and we're skimming into worst case scenarios, we're ruminating over that fight we had with our partner, we are keeping ourselves in high alert. And so the longer exhalation, I mean, it is used for sleep, but it's also used for resetting. So physiologically, that's what that longer exhalation does. But also what you're doing is you are removing a lot more neurotoxins and junk out of your system, which helps it operate more cleanly and more clearly
Okay.
as well. So we detox. One of our biggest detoxification functions is the breath.
So in terms of a practice, before moving on to meditation, in terms of a practice of breathing, I'm thinking awareness. If before a meeting, before going to sleep, before having a conversation, or even whilst having a conversation, whilst noticing, hey, I'm getting annoyed, I'm getting impatient, I'm getting
Yep. Stop and
attention
breathe.
back,
Yep.
focus on the breath. And
Yep.
and just know, 'cause it only takes 2 or 3 seconds, doesn't it? Well, it creates the space in which we can then reevaluate and respond wisely as opposed to reacting in accordance with habitual
What's
thoughts.
our interface? But
Yeah.
you know, for a lot of people with a dysregulated nervous system, that's actually really hard to do. Awareness, you know, okay, I'm listening to my breaths, I'm feeling my breaths, and then woof, the mind will chase a rabbit down a rabbit hole. So some of the really fundamental breathing practices are all around counting. You know, you may have heard of fourfold breath or square breath that is quite
Yes.
popular, where
Do
you
you want to
breathe in
just
for 4. Yep, you breathe in for a slow count of 4. You hold the breath on full for a count of 4. You breathe out for a count of 4. You hold the breath on empty for a count of 4. So you're breathing around a square, 4 sides for a count of 4, and there's a held breath on full and a held breath on empty, which also has a physiological impact, which cultivates better breathing. So I could explain that in a second. But any kind of counting gives your mind a bone. And then, which we all understand, we all
we
need
need the
something
bone.
to hold
Yeah.
on to. And also the longer exhalation, which you mentioned, you know, there's the typical sleep ratio, which uses that longer exhalation, is the 4-7-8 breath. So you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, you breathe out slowly for 8. So that's another one, but that really decelerates, and people use that for sleep. But the fourfold breath, that's a good one. There's another one from Zen Buddhists, which I love giving my new students, which is called counting breath. And I have a version of this on Insight Timer for free. And this is a fabulous diagnostic to just see how scattered your mind is. And it's different every time you do it. Some days we're on it. And so the way that that works is that all you need to do, the practice, super simple, is that you count your in breath and out breath. That's one full breath. So you count 10 breaths, in and out 1, in and out 2, in and out, all the way to 10. And then if you get
Okay.
to 10, you start again. The minute you realize that you've gone down a rabbit hole or that your mind is dulling to the count, you have to start again at 1. It's super simple, but there are
Okay.
some days you do it and you're like 1, 1, 1,
Exactly.
2,
Yeah.
1. And then there are other days that you do it. So it's good for a number of reasons. It's getting the breath going. It's giving you a scaffolding to follow. It's giving you a really good idea of how unconcentrated your mind
Yeah.
actually is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's giving you a benchmark for how you can improve day to day.
Yeah. I love that. And you get to sort of, I'm doing it for 4 and I'm getting to think to myself, yeah, this is easy. Yeah, this is quite useful. And I'm getting to 8. I'm thinking, I don't need any more of this.
Yep. But
I've cracked this.
yeah, exactly. But the second you say this is getting easy, you're off the practice. You got to go back to 1. So
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
If you go, oh, yeah, this is a piece of cake, I need something, up, back to one. Because the narrative of the mind is so alluring and so active, and what we're trying to do with these practices is rather than blindly, like an addict, follow the thought that's moving through, is go, oh, look, there's a thought going through. That's
Okay.
it.
Yes.
That's what the Buddha meant. Like the awareness is like the sky and thoughts are like a cloud, right?
Yeah.
But yet we associate a lot of our story, our identity with the clouds, and we're actually
Yeah.
the sky. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Always looking for the clouds and feeling very uncomfortable in a clear sky. It's like, well, where are the clouds?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and also, paradoxically, of course, it's the clouds that obscure the beauty or the light
Yep.
that is coming
Yep.
from our sun.
Look, it's really difficult. You never move into a full, clear, blue sky continuous mode. It's impossible
No.
because we're intelligent beings. We've got different aspects of mind. We're interfacing, and also we're all suffering from data overload.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of us. Like the digital age is just, we absorb more information in a day today than a man in the Middle Ages absorbed in a year.
I know. I can imagine it. Absolutely stunning,
Just
staggering
think,
statistic.
staggering. All of the media, all of the data, all of the screens.
Let's talk about meditation.
Okay.
What is meditation? Different
Okay.
types. I mean, because
Okay.
so many people talk about it. Yes, I do it. Yeah, I do it this, I do it that. What is meditation?
Okay, what is meditation? Okay, so the term meditation in Sanskrit, it has a number of different names, but the basic name in Sanskrit for meditation is dhyana, dhyan. And all that means is to rotate the awareness inwards and observe.
Okay,
That's it.
simple.
Rotate the awareness inwards. Yeah, simple. And observe. Okay. So there are lots of different forms of meditation. So we have, for example, mindfulness meditations. That's a whole world of meditation where we apply our awareness usually to different aspects of the body. So we might put our awareness on our breath, for example, and the way we're breathing. So that's a form, what we've just done is a form of meditation. We might feel into the structure and the weight of our body. We might sense behind closed eyes our immediate environment. Or we might move our awareness through the senses. What am I smelling now? What's the taste in my mouth now? What are the sounds within the soundscape around me? These are all forms of mindfulness meditation, and they're all super effective and they're beautiful. Then we might have, for example, another category is heart-centered meditations. So these are meditations where we use the mind and a particular thought to generate an emotional response. And so examples of these might be gratitude meditation or loving kindness meditation or compassion or equanimity meditations. There's beautiful meditations around heart-centered stuff and creating a harmonic frequency in the heart, which we now know through the Heart Math Institute heals us. There's creative meditation. So an example of that might be where you do a mandala coloring thing, where all those beautiful sand mandalas that are made. So it's an action. It's not like eyes closed, super still, but you're absorbing yourself into some kind of beautiful creative act. And if you speak with creatives, painters and writers, I'm a writer,
Yeah.
when you're really absorbed in the act of creation, it has exactly the same feeling as a deep meditation, and you move into creative flow. Your mind starts operating in a different way. So what else is there? There's visualization, so that's another form of meditation where you may fix a visualization in your mind, like a color or Trataka candle flame gazing is a beautiful example of that from the yoga tradition, where you open the eyes and you soft gaze at a candle for a few minutes, and then you close the eyes and you soft gaze at the retinal imprint that the candle flame has made until you can't perceive it anymore. And it's this beautiful undulation between inner sight and outer sight. We know that it improves eyesight and helps with the optic nerve. That's proven. But what it does do is it gives you, even though it's using a retinal imprint, which is the negative distortion from the light coming into the optic nerve, it gives you a sense of that inner space of
Yeah.
the awareness.
Yeah.
So that would be an example of like a visualization, meditating on soft gazing at yantras, sun meditations as well. They need to be done with someone who knows what they're doing, or you can really burn out your retinas. But all of these are using vision, whether it's inner vision or the eyes, to focus the awareness inwards, and the system will regulate itself. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, there are several other categories, but for people new to meditation, when they're coming and going, I want to learn how to meditate, I get them breathing first, because it's very difficult to engage in some of the other more sophisticated forms of meditation if you dysregulate it. You just can't.
Yeah.
So I always start people on pranayama, on breathing.
And some of the further meditations, I mean, silent meditation.
So Vipassana, that is another form of meditation. Is that's quite ritualistic. It's not a one-off. It's usually a retreat away from crazy life, and where you have some form of sensory deprivation. And the most common one is communication. So if you go on a Vipassana retreat, which is usually 9 to 10 days, you have a teacher, a practitioner there who's guiding you, but there is no verbal communication. And if it's true Vipassana, there's not even any eye contact. You cannot journal, you cannot write.
Yeah.
So what you're really doing is you're cutting all of that sensory stimulation out. Included in that is our need to speak, because there's a whole lot of thought process that goes on behind that. And it's very vigorous. Like I've done Vipassana a couple of times. The first 3 days for me, I think I'm going crazy. But if you can stick with it and you're getting really, really good guidance, it always results in some form of an unfoldment, like an expansion of your awareness and excellent mastery. And you've got to get over things. Like if you're in a Vipassana retreat and usually the meals all happen at the same time, you can't be polite and say, "Excuse me so much, can you pass the salt?" You just get up and you take the salt. So that kind of etiquette has to go out the window too, which can be challenging. But that's Vipassana is an example of silent retreat. There's a more extreme one where you deprive yourself of light,
Dark retreat.
a dark retreat, which is a whole other level. That's like Vipassana on steroids. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I did at one point in an ashram or in a monastic community, a private silent retreat. So no
Amazing.
talking, no listening, no reading, no writing, no nothing. But do you know what? The most important thing was what you just mentioned there, which is no eye contact. That is the most, and I kind of realized when doing that is the most powerful form of communication that we have.
It is. It is. I agree. And in the yogic tradition, it's also our eyesight is one of our largest hemorrhages of vital life force.
Yes.
So being aware of that. But I love the idea of a private hermitage Vipassana. That sounds super cool. But also people in every day can do it. Like this is what a digital
Well,
detox is, for example.
that's exactly the point. Both these occasions, I've been in sort of sometimes very noisy places, but I'm in a bubble. And it's all, there are also environments where silence is also respected. So there are plenty of other people who are doing that kind of thing as well. But it's something that we can do in the busyness of life.
Yes,
We
we
can do it walking
Yep.
down the street. We can create ourselves a bubble and intentionally focus on the breathing, intentionally disassociate ourselves safely.
Yep. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
And go into that
And we
space.
can pick just one element of stimulation in our lives and just give ourselves a break from it. So
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah.
And just go, okay, for 2 weeks, I'm not going to
Yeah.
watch TV.
Yeah.
Or on my screen, or a digital detox, or even a food type, a stimulant.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that, when I talk to people about meditation or hear people, they very often it's, I can't do that. I've tried doing it. It doesn't work. And what I say is that actually don't focus on whether it's working or not working. Establish an intention, establish a discipline and regularity. Regularity is more important than longevity. So,
Absolutely. Yep.
what I do is every single morning and evening I meditate. Every
Yep.
single morning and evening I
Yep.
meditate. Now, whether it is for 2.5 minutes or an hour, hour and a half, whatever it may be, depends
Yep.
upon the context. But
But you turn up.
the
Yeah.
discipline is there, and then the opportunity allows it to flower. And it's
Absolutely.
like a muscle. The
It
more
is a
we
muscle.
do it, the more we use it, the more it naturally falls into place. So
It does.
we've just
Yep,
got to
it does. I'm the same. I'm every morning. I don't meditate at night because I'm tired and I just fall asleep.
I
But
me me too,
every
it's not the best time, but I still do
yeah,
it.
yeah, but and it sends you off into a great sleep. So you're
Yeah.
just regulating your system. But every single morning I meditate without fail. Now, what kind of meditation I do might change, and I do it. I journal as well. So I treat my spiritual practice quite scientifically. So I will commit to a practice. So at the moment, I've committed to, not at the moment, like I've been doing it since October, 100 mantras every morning.
Okay.
And it's a particular framework that I'm doing, but I've committed to it. And what you're talking about is true. Like our mind is trained and reformed through repetition. And we know this. We know this from psychological arenas. We know it from spiritual arenas. And so this mantra for me now, my body knows I'm going to engage in it. And my body shifts into a beautiful sense of anticipation and a memory of the frequency that the 100 mantras generate before I've even started,
Right.
because I've
Yeah.
been doing it every single day since the beginning of October.
Right.
Your system, you start to create these associations. So that's why I say to my new students as well is try to meditate at the same time in the same place every time, and try to use the same, like I love essential oils, for example. I've got them all over the place. But if you're doing a defined practice, we say this month I'm going to do fourfold breath every single morning for 10 minutes in my chair in my bedroom, and I'm going to anoint myself with, what's this one? Black rose oil before I do it. Now, your system will start to create a very strong association between you sitting in the chair, the smell of the oil, the time of the day, and it's going to regulate, and it will start to regulate on its own before you even start the practice, but only with repetition. But it doesn't take long. Like the neuroplasticity tells us 10 minutes a day, 21 days, you've cut a new neural pathway for meditation. But I do think as well, it's like training. So if anyone listening to this is trained for a marathon, for example, and first thing, you can't just go into the gym, have one workout and be ready. Similarly, you can't do one set of meditation, go, nah, that didn't work for me. I don't feel anything. So that's just ridiculous, right? However, when you're training physically, you do get to a point where you're not pushing yourself into the gym anymore. You're actually getting pulled towards it because you are starting, you're feeling
Yes.
fitter, you're looking better, your body is sensing the innate benefit of the exercise, you're feeling stronger, and you're enjoying it. And it really becomes an important and prioritized part of your life. Exactly the same thing happens with meditation. There comes a point where you wake up and you go, I've got my practice. And your body loves it. And it's like I say to my students, make it sacred. Have a little cloth, light a little candle, make it really special because it's possibly the only thing you're going to give yourself this day. And so make it bougie, but all of that sensory evocative stuff like the oil, the candle, and so on, helps you program more deeply.
Yeah. At lots of different levels. It engages all the senses, and it's as you say, it's a discipline. It integrates. It's routine, but it's also ceremony. It's also
Yep.
ritual.
Yep. It
And
is.
these are all things that are very, very powerful, and they're used in everyday life. I mean, we have the ritual, don't we, of turning up to work, for instance, at 9 o'clock, or the ritual of leaving, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
These are all
yeah,
things.
yeah,
So when we
they
become
are,
mindful
yeah.
of them, we can direct them towards wholesome regulation as
That's
opposed to
absolutely right.
just draining.
Sorry, I'm just so big on that point that you've just said. That's why I'm talking over the top of you. Sorry,
Yeah, you
Greg. It's not
do
great for
so.
a podcast, is it?
You
But
go for it.
one of the things that needs to be addressed with my
So
C-suite,
what are you very hot on?
this idea of ritual and
Okay.
making it sacred. And the reason why I really encourage particularly my executive coachees to bring in more evocative kind of ritual is because very often when they start with me, they're applying that achievement, fast track, I'm going to learn how to meditate mindset to meditating, right?
Yeah.
And that just doesn't work because you're not regulating your nervous system. You're just going, right, it's another thing I've got to tick off the list, right? And I've even had, not recently, but I've even had offers from really high up executives saying, I will double your rate if you can teach me meditation faster.
I love that.
So that mindset, and I see it in other arenas of people's lives. Another area that I love working in is when someone takes a redundancy, and there's a lot of really weird mixed emotion around that, and a lot of identity recalibration. And I took a redundancy as well, which was my ticket to freedom and into purpose and meaning. But I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like when you've worked for decades and your identity and you're really good at what you do, and then all of a sudden, boom, that's gone. But what I do find is that that's when I'll get engaged by someone going, right, I want to find my purpose. But they apply that executive driven, achievement oriented approach to their redundancy. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're going into a different operating mode now. But it's what's worked for them in the past. But that's what bringing ritual does into meditation practice, and it makes it lovely. Scent and our bodies respond to all of that stuff so readily and happily.
Yeah. Well, with an eye on the time,
Yeah.
Dani, and as I said to you a moment earlier, I hope we'll be able to do this again in focusing on some of these areas, because there's a great deal of interest in this. This has been a
I'd love to.
wonderful conversation, Dani. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And would you just say a little bit about how people can get in touch with you, how people can connect with you, see the work you're doing, engage with you online, all that kind of stuff? Because not everybody has the great fortune to live in Singapore.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, thank you for asking me on, Greg. It's always so fun talking about this stuff. We're both nerds on this, aren't we? I could talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it for hours.
yeah, I
So
agree.
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Okay, so there's a number of different ways you can engage with me, and you don't need to be in Singapore. Most of my stuff is globally accessible. So you can read my book, which is called Spirited. You can have a look at my online communities with beautiful courses and coaching and masterclasses, Spirited Living with Dani.com. My main website is my name, DanielleVanDeVelde.com. If you want to book me for coaching, my deep dive coaching is currently full, and I probably won't have availability until about March this year for that. You can book me for distance healing, for a Zoom coaching session just to reset, get different, or even just a tutoring session in basic meditation. Use me any way you like. That's my website, which is my name, DanielleVanDeVelde.com. So you can tune into my podcast, which is called The Modern Crone. You can tune into my radio show, which is once a month on News for the Soul, which is also called Spirited Living, or just send me an email and go, what would suit me? And that's info@daniellevandervelde.com. So just get the spelling of my name right and you can find me.
Dani, you are a you are a star shining bright. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bless you, and be well.
Thank you so much, Greg. Have a great day over there.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. What a beautiful conversation that was. I really hope that you got as much from that as I did. To find out more about Dani, please see the links that are in the show notes below, and I 100% recommend the work she's doing with people. Thank you also for listening and watching and being present here with us. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, as this greatly encourages the algorithms to spread the conversations to a wider audience. I think you know the routine. And leave a comment as well and share what you're thinking, because we also love to hear from you and your thoughts. This is Metaconscious Leaders with me, Greg Suart. Until next week, be present, be centered, and be well. Thank you.